we have a, oh, this being recorded. We were, I got your newsletter in the other day, and I was reading it, and it was really on point, and I think you crystallized a lot of ideas and a lot of issues that are coming up in the road, coming ahead. One of the things right now in my role in Pachanga.net as the editor, and in my role as in the National Gaming Association, it's kind of my job to watch the industry and stay on top and look at all the trends and stuff like that. And right now, we're seeing a lot of exuberance for sports betting. We're seeing a lot of exuberance for online gaming, and everyone's very excited about that. But also at the same time, we're also dealing with this variant, this Omicron variant of the COVID-19, and obviously with the cancellation of ICE recently, and yesterday announced the postponement, excuse me, of both ICE and the California Nations Indian Gaming Associations. So this pandemic is very real. It doesn't seem to be going away. I keep reading about a peak that's going to be happening in mid-January. Now it's been moved to mid-February. And so what do you guys think of all this doom and gloom? Is this something we should be concerned about, or should we just keep on?
Well, we've got to keep on keeping on. That's all. I mean, we don't have an option, really. I mean, in some ways, but I think that I think we've just got to adapt, and deal with it. And I think the hard part is people are dealing with things that are coming up on a daily basis, and so it's hard to look forward. Tribes like a lot of tribes, they want to, the 7-generation mentality to look forward and to plan. And tribal councils and leaderships within tribes, management at casinos, they've been dealing with day-to-day issues right now, and have really pretty much for the last, couple of years, since early 2020, because, we're in unprecedented territory, and people are making decisions, and they can't look back and say, well, what worked in the past? They've got to make the best decisions they can and use the information that's coming to them from whether it's the CDC, or listen to Fauci, as it relates to the Omicron, listen to, advisors like us on, financial things. And, we're in unprecedented territory as well. I think a couple of things that we do know, and living in the present right now, and probably going to be with us for a little while, is the Omicron variant really is much more contagious, as we've all seen. I think, we're stating the obvious in a lot of this, much more contagious. I just anecdotally have known so many more people that have caught the Omicron than even the previous Delta and the original. In some cases, they're, down and out for a week. A lot of cases, they're not feeling much other than a sniffly nose for a day or so and coming back. But still, it's much more contagious. But I think we already had a short labor market, and even though the stimulus packages ended, last year, and, the unemployment benefits went away and sunset, it's still hard to find, especially in the restaurant and hospitality sector, people that, want to work. We saw some fourth quarter data that both restaurants and hospitality were quitting their jobs at 2 times the national average. People, it feels like, and there's no surveys out there to back this up other than that particular fact as to why they're doing that. It's hard work, but as we talk to clients, and they've been battling this for the last year effectively, but certainly it hadn't gotten better. Increasing wages, offering incentives, that really hasn't helped. And so
I even saw something where they were talking about letting 14-year-olds work.
Yeah, I mean, people are trying to do anything, and so we were already with that. Then Omicron comes, and casino managers we're talking to, Bill and I were on the phone with one the other night, and he said record call-outs. Never have had so many people call, and I do feel like we feel it's legitimate. I mean, a lot of companies are requiring the test. You got to show that you actually have it, but it's legitimate call-outs. I mean, people are actually, they're sick and they're down, and it's causing a lot of difficulty. I worry about the guys that are showing up sometimes. I mean, the people that are sticking with the industry. So I think tribal councils and leaderships and casino management, they're dealing with something that we haven't had this type of labor shortage coupled with the Omicron. I think people are less worried about dying from Omicron as they are just maybe the impacts on their business. Before we got on, we're all talking about the personal, things that we're seeing, whether it's a Starbucks closing or Victor, you mentioned the Warm Springs closing just because of that.
Right. Last night, the Warm Springs tried to announce that they're shutting down their government for a week, but they also announced that they're shutting down their casino for a week. And in the article, it said on the website, the tribe announced that because of people calling out and the lack of employees and the lack of staffing, that they're going to be closing for another week. So that's really the first time that I've seen the lack of staffing closing down a casino. Last week they announced in Ontario, Canada, they were closing a couple of those casinos down. The ones that the Mohegans manage are all shut down over in Niagara and stuff like that too. So, this labor market this tight labor market, it's unlike anything we've ever seen. And you're absolutely right. I remember when we first started in gaming, it was such a big deal that the employees were part of the tribes and part of the family, and we were so grateful that these people wanted to come to the reservation and work on our properties. And it kind of feels like that doesn't, that's gone. It just feels like very clinical. They're the employee, we're the employer, you're the employee. And I think that has to change. I think people are looking for better lifestyles, less work. And everything that I've been reading, this big quit on 60 Minutes they had over the weekend talking about the big quit, or as they called it. And it's very real. So how is this going to affect the tribes in the short term and the long term? What does this mean?
Well, I'll jump in and I'll let Bill add to it. And this is recent conversations with clients on things. One that we had with a tribe that's in a little bit more of a remote location. They're having a lot of trouble, obviously, with their F&B, but they're older property. Average age of their customers, 61 years old. They need to reinvent themselves a little bit, right? And we've been talking about this even pre-COVID. What do we do? Let's look at your footprint. Should we add some more hotel rooms? Should we create a F&B? Some experiences? What do we need to do? And we've talked about ideas. COVID kind of hit. We shelved it. And they've been financially, they're fine. I mean, through COVID, as a lot of casinos have done, well or very well, and they've used those proceeds to pay down debt. They're going to be in a position to be debt free in a couple of years, and we don't want to, have them borrow money for something that won't work. But they said, we don't know how we would staff if we created a new F&B scenario. We don't know how to staff it. And we don't know, we don't want to commit to that really, until we're comfortable that we can staff it, because that's a problem. Our partner, Christy Jackson, is at a client now in the Pacific Northwest who just opened in the past couple of weeks a hotel. And she's there and she said, it's a mess. They don't have, they're only, even though they can have the demand, they don't have the number of, the restaurants are half full, but there's an hour wait, and they're only half the tables because there's not enough people. They can't even open all of the hotel rooms because they don't have enough staff to cover, even though the demand is there. So I think that's a bit of the problem is what's going on and planning for future, until we get through some of this period to understand what you can do because of staffing. We've just never been in this position in my career where there was this kind of staffing crisis almost.
Bill, I saw an article the other day talking about a hotel that's using these electronic dumbwaiters, or basically robots that'll go to your door and drop the food off and stuff like that. But they're still going to have a problem if you can't get cooks and stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess just taking a big step back, if we look back, it's hard to believe that it's the beginning of 22, but if we get back in our time machine to April of 20, where there were complete shutdowns, the first wave of shutdowns, like it or not, I mean, there's the big benefit here is that there's been a surge in locals gaming, which primarily benefits tribal casinos. If you go back to April 20, where there's shutdowns and we're trying to figure out how we're going to navigate COVID to just from the beginning, you have your shutdowns, and that's where we were up around the clock with many tribes trying to figure out what their cash flow situation is. Now you get into 21, we actually reached kind of a steady state where folks were going out again, businesses, and keep in mind, food and beverage and the casino business, they're on the front line of this thing because of the type of interaction we have with clients. And in many respects, they're going to be driving how business morphs this has the perfect name, in the new normal. So what I would ask people to think is where are we going to be in 2024? And I think eventually we are actually going to migrate to more normal business practices. But in the interim, Indian casinos, tribal casinos, food and beverage, tribal and non-tribal, they're going to be on the forefront of how we navigate working in a COVID environment. I think the benefit right now is because a lot of tribes, both because business has been performing well, and again, it's case by case, David, we do want to take note of there are tribes that are not benefiting in this environment, those that seem to be in more remote locations in particular. But as we migrate to a new normal, how these businesses navigate and are able to use their current, they're flush with cash. A lot of them are, and a lot of tribes have benefited from the stimulus support that has come into play. I think that if you keep that in mind, yes, there's going to be labor shortages in the short term, but tribes are well positioned to kind of navigate through this environment, not only in the short term, but get in position to really drive and establish how business is going to operate in the new normal.
One of the interesting things that I thought was really brilliant that the San Manuel tribe did is that, they reached out to a local trade school, and these colleges and stuff like that. And just really, looking at these young people and explaining to them how this is a great career in hospitality. As a matter of fact, next week, we're having a Stowe Shoemaker from UNLV School of Hospitality over there to talk about this also. But it just seems like everyone's just scrambling to find these workers to replace. And you're right, a lot of these frontline workers, and there's a lot of fatigue dealing in, and you're seeing the same issue with healthcare and stuff like that. So it seems it's again, there's this dichotomy going, because you're right, we're flush with cash on one hand, yet on the other hand, you're seeing, the ship is kind of falling apart too,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'd like to jump on that one point, Victor, as far as the opportunity it presents to folks that are in trade schools, or, talking to the CEO of an F&B company that's local here. He said, if you're 18 years old and you don't have a bunch of experience, keep in mind, yes, there's kind of this societal shift to working less, and there's obviously demands. If you have a shutdown and your kid has to stay home from school, there's navigating that. But if you're a young person that doesn't have a lot of skill, now is a great opportunity to get into a business. And within, I was quoted, within 6 months, you could find yourself in a manager position, making a pretty good living. And that's the opportunity that it's presenting to this kind of younger generation to step in and get that experience and be part of the solution going forward.
What do you
think,
think,
Jason?
Just shifting it a little, we've got bad inflation now for over a year, and it's pretty much, the Fed has confirmed that inflation is going to be with us throughout the next year, and the Fed is going to have to raise rates to combat it. What are you telling your clients now? You mentioned, new projects, David, and they can't find staff, but, on top of that, you have supply shortage issues, and now you've got financing issues. If taking out a loan to build a, $2 million in improvements is going to be, 3% versus 1.5% or even higher than 3% nowadays. So what are you seeing on that end, and how should tribes start to adjust for higher inflation?
Well, yeah, and that's a great point, Jason, because as inflation comes, unlike a restaurant who, if my wife was telling me she paid $8 a pound for some hamburger meat, so the restaurants, they're probably not paying that, but their prices are up too. So, I mean, I've never seen so many $15 and $16 hamburgers at just regular places, that have popped up. So it's hitting everybody, but a restaurant can change their price, right? If their prices go up, they can increase the price of their hamburger if their meat goes up, and we all kind of are trained to, we'll pay for it. You can't change a slot machine. You can't, I mean, you can, but I mean, your clients will know that. So it's about demand. So I think there's going to be a shift, in terms of, on the casino side, I think people are really going to be focused on how to create more demand if they can, and to manage to really be very tight on the employment side and try to keep that under wraps. When we're doing projections for casinos, we're spending a lot more time with their management, in terms of where they see healthcare costs going, what kind of inflationary rates they're going to do, and let's even add on to that. So we can kind of look on forecast. But when you get to new projects, that project has really got to be something that, if it's casino related, that's driving that demand feature, because that's the one component that they can. So if it's driving demand and we kind of look at it, it's going to be enough demand, it's fine. We're not really worried about financing costs are stupid low right now, right? I mean, LIBOR at 10 basis points. I mean, and it's really only projected to go to maybe 1.5%.
Right.
Now, granted, that's 10 times. I mean, it's a big change, but a 1% LIBOR, that's still historically, when we look over, the last 20 years, that's pretty low. So, even if it goes to 2, I don't think the financing costs, it's really going to be, on the gaming side, is there going to continue to be that growth in the economy that people are going to be willing to spend? Is inflation going to, we don't have the answer. Is inflation going to cut in to entertainment wallet, right? I mean, as people are starting to spend, we had that entertainment wallet expanded originally because we had the stimulus money and everybody came in, and a lot of casinos had an opportunity to increase their demand because customers in California, especially, they didn't have any place to go. And they feel like they've stuck, a lot of those customers have stuck. And so they've increased their customer base. But is that wallet going to, as we start to feel more and more pressure on our own spending, what's that going to do? We just don't have an answer for that. So we're watching that very closely.
How do you guys think the holiday season did for across the country?
We haven't really taught, most people haven't closed their books quite yet. So we don't really know. I don't have really any data. Bill, do you have any?
What we've heard,
I talked to a couple guys.
because of depending on location and how hot Omicron was, there was on the margin impact during the holiday period to get, just because folks were concerned about contagion and whatnot. And then you had obviously impact on the workforce. So we haven't seen hard numbers come out from, we're not talking about national or aggregate level data, but property specific information. Folks are still wrapping up, but I would imagine that they're on the margin. In late December, there was some impact around the Christmas, New Year's timeframe, but nothing. No one is ringing alarm bells from an operating standpoint. It's really happening right now as far as how do we navigate labor shortages. It's hard to provide enough staff to just operate F&B. A lot of the stuff, frankly, that we saw when, for example, Vegas was just opening up, just the shortages of, you're actually either there for business or for pleasure, and it's hard to get a cup of coffee, that type of stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of what we were experiencing when we were there in the summer, and we noticed over Christmas is when the cancellations started happening. We were going to go to Europe, and we just started watching just all the horror stories for getting in and out in Italy. So then that dropped off, and then we were going to, we were hoping to get to ice, and then that got postponed too. So I think from what I saw empirically, Christmas Day was pretty packed. I think the families and stuff like that, but you didn't see a lot of the New Year's parties. You didn't see a lot of those events at the end of the year and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how it affected the business rate. So one of the other things that you mentioned in your newsletters, that you mentioned the rising interest rates and how that is right now. It is low. Do you expect them to rise later on, or are they going to keep them low because of
And what's the threshold you
pandemic?
start to get worried? You know, is it the 10-year at 3% when you start to?
Yeah, I mean, 10 years, what, the 10 years projected to go to like 2.2, I think, at the end of the year or something like that. So, yeah, I've seen, I mean, I saw LIBOR at 7% when I was starting my career doing real estate, and we made deals work. So, you know, it all depends, right? I mean, you know, high interest rates, it just depends on what else is going on with the economy. So, you know, 3%, maybe you're worried, maybe you're not. Most tribal borrowers aren't really, if they're borrowing in the bond market, there's a few that have bonds out. If they're borrowing in the bond market, or if we're showing them bond deals, we're looking at muni type stuff. So, you know, actually you get a better discount the higher the rate is because of the tax rate. So, you know, it makes some of these, it may, you know, when rates are down at 1%, you know, it's not quite as attractive on a muni basis. So we may see more muni bond issuances actually as rates go up, because it could be more attractive. On the floating rate side, really, I mean, it's probably going to drift up over the next couple of years into the 2% range. But we had 2% in the last 10 years, and people managed. So it's something to watch. I think it's more of a budgeting thing for tribals, you know, for them to look. They can't really control it. It's more to make sure that you've factored that in to what ultimately your expenses are going to be, whether it's at your casino or at the tribe if you borrowed on a floating rate basis. Right? We know it's going to be there, and we got, you know, to be cautious about it, but we're not as worried that it's going to upend anybody. Much more worried about the inflation and the employment environment right now.
I would add to that, you know, clearly biased, because in TFA's world, financial forecasting and modeling, you know, kind of is what we do day in, day out. But that exercise is really what's imperative here for tribes, both at the tribal level and at the enterprise level, to have a firm grasp as to where they believe their financial projections, their cash flow forecast is going to be. Because, you know, people get, we've been operating close to 15 years in a low interest rate environment. There's, you know, that is what people perceive really as a normal operating environment. We really shouldn't be too concerned, frankly, about returning to a normal interest rate environment. David touched on one point. You know, the muni market's been, I would argue, largely dislocated for the last decade or so because interest rates have been so low. So there's not a lot of benefit. You see, you know, if you go back all the way to 2000 or the 90s, there was a lot more interest in accessing the tax-free market because there was a lot more benefit there. So again, you know, what we're focused on is that cash flow forecast. Folks, you know, we talked about the price of hamburger meat. As far as projects are concerned, folks have seen substantial increases in the price of steel, lumber, other commodities that are required to build things. I would advocate that folks look at cash and the capital needed for projects in much the same way. It's a resource used to build and move projects forward, used for economic diversification. And what's critical isn't necessarily, you know, as long as we're not in hyperinflation, which is a whole other problem to contend with, it's really understanding the financial forecast. And as you look at projects, just because the cost of capital has gone up doesn't mean that negates pursuing projects. It's really becomes more imperative to understand what you really believe the return on investing those cash flows are. Because just because the cost of capital has increased 200, 300 basis points, but if you have a project that's going to yield a 20% return, you should be doing that all day long, regardless of the fact that the cost of money is going up. That's what we're really trying to emphasize to folks. Do that exercise, really have a firm grasp on your cash flow forecast. And the last thing that I would add to that is, you know, we live in a world, and I have a deep appreciation for those that work in the derivatives market. But one thing that gets lost sometimes is one of the primary risk mitigants against debt is having a debt repayment strategy in place. And if you have focused on that and have a firm grasp on your debt repayment strategy, that in of itself is a primary way of mitigating this rising cost of capital as far as borrowing and whatnot.
Do you, at what point are we going to start to see expansions being affected? Is there a point here? I mean, everyone's looking, with the pandemic, I think with the lack of labor, I think you can see a lot of hotels being, obviously they're waiting. Before this, that was a big deal. Everybody was building hotels in California. It was the resort. Do you think there's going to be a blowback in that? I think people are just going to look back to go to the basics and stuff like that.
Well, as I kind of said before, to keep the gaming enterprise afloat, if it makes sense to build a hotel, I think people are really going to take a hard look at it. I think the staffing issue, we're all knocking wood right now. If you start a hotel and it's going to be built in 12 to 18 months, whatever, that hopefully we're through it all. But, I think a lot of it we said in COVID, when 2020, when this thing came out, we all said, oh, well, by 22, you open in 22, it'll all be fine. Don't worry about that. Everything will be back to normal. Well, it's not back to normal. So I think it's changing people's, the way they're thinking about it. But I think once people get a little bit more handle on staffing and maybe Omicron eventually runs its course, and so we're not having these record call outs, they'll figure out a way. I mean, I think anything that can be automated is going to, people are going to be, there's going to be a big focus on automating. I mean, thank goodness for slot. I mean, if you think about slot machines right now, you can go in, once they can get to where maybe you can use your debit card or credit card, it'll even eliminate more people, right? Where if we can get to a cashless type system, but you've got, thank goodness that, they're automated for the most part. Then you've got the, ATMs, for people to get cash. They don't have to go to the cashier window. They can get their tickets out at the ticket disbursement. So, you do have to have service and you've got to have some people on the floor, but not nearly the kind of staffing that's required, whether it's table games or it's, the F&B product. So I think, people will start to move towards as much automation as they can to alleviate this, but that's a longer term fix that maybe we'll start to see in 23 and 24. Right now, we've just got to kind of get through this.
I don't disagree with what David's saying, but I would add, just going back to my earlier comments, in 20, we have a full shutdown, right? Because we don't know what we're doing. Now there's this very infectious Omicron variant. At some point, and I'm not trying to open up a political can of worms, it is a very, very challenging thing on the political, both local, state, national, coming up with policies to help protect people from this. No doubt it's challenging, but we already see an evolution in how politicians and health departments are looking at this relative to where we were 2 years ago. And so as much as I agree with David, there will be a move towards, hey, how can we mitigate this risk? That's just how business people think. I don't want to wake up a year from now and have to deal with this risk again. But at the same time, there's just going to be, we already, I believe, kind of see it in how you can look at the state of California. 2 years ago, we would have been in another shutdown. That's just not practical. And no, I don't believe that anyone thinks that that's practical at this stage, even though, clearly we need to protect people from the harm that this virus can cause. At the same time, I would say 2 years from now, we probably, society will have evolved to a point where there's greater comfort in how, on a day-to-day basis, we can navigate this thing. What that ultimately is, I don't know. But if you go all the way back to 1920 with the Spanish flu, by the time it's 1924, folks aren't really talking about the Spanish flu anymore. It was a horrific thing that happened, but society was able, the entire globe was able to evolve and address it. Loosely speaking, I think that's just how people will adapt to interacting with this. And I would say, hopefully by 2024, we're better capable to handle how we interact with this thing? Is it ever going to go away? I think we'll be looking at COVID shots for forever, probably. That,
COVID shots in a bar. We're talking like
Yeah.
in the bar, Jello
There you go.
COVID shots is what we're talking about. And also, I don't think we're going to wait till 2024. I'm talking about March of this year, right before our show. So I think if we can get it together before then, I think
Okay.
that would be better. Jason, what do you think? Are we going to have all infected casinos next? Is that what we're going to have?
No.
Is this going to be a thing where you can go either an all vax casino or an all infected casino where you can just,
No, I
do-
mean, I will get political because, you're starting to see, I saw the quote from President Macron in France saying he wants to make unvaccinated people's lives hell. At some point there's a tolerance thing. And I don't know when this all started, but, our schools have been mandatory vaccination for, decades, since all those MMR vaccines. And then the polio vaccine was, you got a letter in the mail and said, go down to your high school and get the polio vaccine from President Eisenhower. And here's a sugar cube, and everybody did it. And what we're finding though is, there are some worrying things about this. Australia has like a 92% vaccination rate and their numbers are skyrocketing right now. And, I could do a smaller comparison in the state of Maryland where I live, where we had a similar exact 92% adult vaccination rate, and our hospitals are over capacity right now, declared a state of emergency, and the National Guard is staffing hospitals in the state and also in DC. So, at some point the insurers and corporations are just going to have to bear down on this. And the scientists are going to have to figure out a way. Look, we all did it. We all used to come to work sick. We had bad head colds and we just come in and plow through it.
Mhm.
And maybe if you're fully vaxxed now and you get the head colds, we just come in and we say, stay away, or we just wear a mask. Something is going to have to break here. Otherwise you're going to have a fundamental change in society. Our economy is mostly service industry based, and consumer based economy. At some points they're not going to pay a lot of money to go to McDonald's or Taco Bell, or, at some point there's got to be a price out point where it becomes prohibitive, and you might as well just go to Whole Foods and buy some fresh food because it's the same price as fast food. So,
it's interesting, Jason, is that, Maryland just announced that their new sports betting numbers are through the roof too. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, and it's only at one location so far. And it's one of the bigger casinos in the world, frankly, in terms of volume of money going through there. It's the people are and Maryland's in person only. You got to go to the casino. We don't have a mobile component yet. So it is fascinating, and there's 5 other casinos in the state of Maryland that can start to implement it. It's I don't know. At some point, there's got to be a fundamental shift of how we're gonna live out our lives. It seemed like I never knew like bars and everything on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights were so important to everybody. But maybe we're learning to live without that kind of, go down to the local watering hole thing. But I am, I'm pretty positive that once we get through this one, we've got to just learn a way to live with this, and and not have pilots calling out sick. The big fear right now is, I don't know why anybody would want to travel right now. You can get stuck anywhere.
Yeah.
You go. It's just that is such and as someone who traveled a lot, that is the worst thing in the world, sitting at airports for hours. And, so, I don't know where this is going to go in the next week, because as you mentioned at the beginning, Victor, this was supposed to be a quick peek and done. And now they're telling us we should never have looked at South Africa like that because it's summertime there and they're all outside. And that's why their Omicron was so quick, and, they got over it quicker. So we're stuck inside.
Well,
with one of the worst
listen,
winters we're having so far.
we had that peak right before G2E. So, that whole summer.
That was Delta though. Yeah.
We have a question, Cicely Ferreira, I hope I said your name right. She said, our local towns closest to our community are not requiring masks, but our tribal community is under tribal law of requiring masks. It is hard to require masks when local non-tribal is not requiring masks in our tribal standards, and we struggle with that. Cicely, I know exactly what you mean. I live in California, Unfortunately, in the community, masks are mandatory in California, but I imagine it's a lot more difficult if you're in, Oklahoma or South Dakota or some of the other states that, or Florida for that fact, who just don't want to have masks. Um, but I think it's important that we hold that line. You know, I think people are starting to become more comfortable being around masks. Even though, listen, we all hate them. I walk outside the door, my masks are off. I walk inside, they're on, but I'm one step outside that door, that mask is off.
They're perfect in cold weather, though. You
Huh?
don't even need, in cold weather, you don't even need a jacket. That mask keeps your whole head hot in
Yeah.
cold weather.
That's
I'm
an
from-
added benefit for sure.
Yeah, I'm from California, so I don't know
I
what
know.
you're talking about, man. It doesn't make any sense. One of the other issues that we're running into here are these supply chain issues too, and this is another big issue. You see it everywhere. And the big issue was during the initial pandemic was the price of plywood and the cost of building, and I know that came down, but also you're starting to see it creep back up again too. You're starting to see it with it. So tell us a little more about this, gentlemen. What should we expect with these supply chain issues?
Well, I mean, we're not supply chain experts. We've just read what everybody else has read, that it should start to feather out. I think part of it has just been, you kind of mentioned it. Why would you travel? I mean, no one's traveling really overseas. People are staying home, and those travel dollars are being spent on goods. We've kind of developed this unbelievable online shopping network now. We've been trained for that. So, a lot of it has just been significant demand by the consumer that's created some of this, right? And then you had the issues. So, Long Beach, they're starting to kind of unwind there. You feel like the supply chain issue anyway, should kind of start to, it's going to be more inflation based rather than supply chain based in the near future. Bill, I don't know if you've got a different take on that.
I kind of am chuckling because, a couple years ago when I was in business school, which is now actually sadly approaching about 20 years ago when I was in business school,
Yesterday?
Yeah, all the rage was focused on just-in-time logistics, right? And so guess what? We're reaping the dividends of just-in-time, everybody going all in on just-in-time. That's not only whether I can get my desk from Crate and Barrel delivered, it's also our hospital system. And we're seeing that firsthand, the impact of having just enough capacity to make our systems as efficient as possible so that we can reduce costs. Okay, well, that's wonderful when everything's running smoothly, but we've all seen what happens when there's shocks and the impact of pricing. I think that there's probably smarter people than myself that are probably thinking about how can we modify these systems so that they can take shocks better, so that we're not having ports clogged. I mean, I'm right here adjacent to San Pedro, and it was quite interesting to see the number of ships that were just stacked outside of Long Beach. How do we fix that? And I think that begs the question. When everybody gloms on to a certain model, and a lot of credit to those that developed that system, but I think we've seen over the last couple of decades a number of shocks, and how do we modify that so that, in particular, our public goods like healthcare aren't significantly impacted if we have something devastating like this hit the system. And then that can potentially translate to not having shocks in how oil's delivered, or how, I'm getting something from Amazon delivered, whether that's, the Santa hat that I wanted delivered around Christmas time, or something more important like an actual book or commodity that I need for my business.
My son is 6 years old, and all he knows is Amazon Prime, and I'm sure, when he is old enough to have a child, that'll probably be a name that they're going to be using back in those days. Prime is going to be a good middle name. But so that's that, it's amazing what our expectations have where it brought us. We're now in this, truly the instant gratification phase of society and stuff like that. So how are these supply chain issues affecting, how are they going to affect the tribes going forward? Are we talking just dealing with construction? Are we talking dealing with employment? Or is this just going to just eventually work itself out?
I think the only kind of anecdotally in talking with clients, the only kind of supply chain issues they've had is, and this is going back a couple of months, was maybe, food delivery, getting food delivery for their F&B delivered timely and on time to be able to deliver their, the menus that they had, and they were just adaptable. I think one thing we've all kind of learned, even personally, is that, if the Santa hat wasn't available, to be delivered, you didn't really need that Santa. You just bought some other kind of hat. You bought a toboggan or something. I mean, you just adapted. I kind of feel like we're being retrained. Victor. I think from the instant gratification to I mean, think about it. You're trained now that it's perfectly acceptable to order your own food online, drive to the restaurant, walk in, pick it up, and tip as much as you did when somebody else was bringing you the food and you were sitting in the restaurant and cleaning your table. Mm-hmm. You're trained to do that now. You're trained to think that way. We've all kind of, and there's generations that are coming up, like you said, young adults that, this is going to be, maybe ingrained in them as that's okay. We're now, restaurants that used to stay open until 9 or 10, we're trained to we better be getting out because they may close at 8 and they're not going to be open on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. We're being trained, to 45-minute wait. Okay, I'll do it. I mean, because I don't have a choice. There's a past 45-minute wait, you were indignant. So I think we're being retrained to some of that a little bit. Some of us are. I'm not going to be retrained for cold French fries from Chick-fil-A. I can't get over that. I got to go back and give them back. But, but
Agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, and that's really where I do see the supply chain issue is in the restaurants and on the menu. You see a limited menu, and what you used to get, you used to get a couple pages. Now you'll get oats for COVID and stuff like that. And how does that affect the tribe's bottom line? Is that actually better for business, or is that worse? I mean, obviously it's a worse selection for the customer, but
I think the customers are being retrained. We're all we understand this is a situation and it's got to be dealt with, and it's not better at the guy next door. So, I kind of feel like that's the supply chain doesn't feel like, I don't hear a lot of complaints. When we talk to guys about what's going on, what's affecting their business, that doesn't seem to be the biggest. Getting parts sometimes maybe, I think we haven't heard it, but that could be something as it relates to, if, somebody said, God forbid, if one of our, we have a big group of devices that go down and we need parts, because that could be taking some devices off the floor for a longer time than we have anticipated.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was an issue with the end of last year with some of the tribes getting into sports betting, is that they couldn't get some of the parts and some of the chips to get the machines going and stuff. So we have been seeing that issue across the country. So Jason, what do we think, man?
Well, I'm just wondering if you guys, real quick, I just feel like there's a big push by the restaurant industry to get everybody to use the apps and pre-order and then just walk in and pick it up. I mean, I can't, it's Starbucks, Panera, all those guys now want you to use the app. And I'm wondering if tribal casinos shouldn't start to just move that way. It alleviates a lot of the front end issues with servers and waitresses, and just focus on the back end. And, people can call down from their hotel room or just use the app to buy stuff. And that really speaks to infrastructure environment, Victor, because if you tie in mobile sports betting and internet gambling, you're going to need a lot of bandwidth at some point to handle all this. Is that more of an East Coast thing where we're just seeing everyone wants to use the app?
I do think that's more of a East Coast thing, just, in talking to friends and family that are in other parts of the country. The push here out west is, how do we maintain outdoor dining? Which clearly isn't a problem in Chicago. I mean, I've seen how they handle that, but that's really the push here. I would also say that what we're observing are tribes and tribal enterprises that have a legacy of really focusing on customer service as a core value. And admittedly, it's a totally different challenge in certain parts of the country to get a dedicated workforce versus, in more populated areas like Los Angeles or the Bay Area or the Pacific Northwest. But some of these tribes have been really innovative in how they're addressing things like the buffet. Conventional thinking was like, hey, let's shut down the buffet. It's always lost its money. There's a tribe in the Southern California area that innovated and is able to deliver that. And they have a really strong workforce. And it's incredible to see that innovation take place and take hold and really drive operating results for them. So mixed bag, case by case. I think I don't want to ignore what corporate business is driving as far as efficiencies. So maybe there is more automation, and that's what David touched on earlier. Maybe that's a way of addressing human capital shortages. But there's just, it's pretty impressive how some tribes just are providing good customer service, and it's really driving home operating results in this environment.
Right. I was going to add to that because I was thinking the exact same thing, Jason, to your question, that, these tribal casinos, if they get to be a commodity, then they're going to die eventually, because if you're just going in and putting money in a slot machine, you're not getting any personal service, you're not feeling warm, welcomed, eventually online gaming, why would, or virtual gaming or whatever they end up going to in years. So I think casinos, the smart managers that we talk to, which is, quite a few of them, they're focused. They know, they've been in this business a long time. It's personal service. So I think when it comes to just getting cash in machines or cashing out your ticket, that wasn't as big a touch point, but that F&B, that service, if they can continue to deliver that. Now they may change for the apps for the Starbucks delivery. When people just want a coffee, they can order it on their Starbucks like Starbucks has done. But I think they continue to, the sticks and bricks investment that's been made into Indian country will survive, and primarily because of the customer service. And I think, that's going to be something that it's a challenge right now with going back there where we started the conversation with the employment, shortage. But I think that's going to continue to be a focus and something for, casino management and tribal councils.
I remember, Jason, when we were in New Mexico at, I believe it was Santa Ana Star Casino, they had the Grubhub signs everywhere in the rooms and stuff like that. And they were pushing people to use the Grubhub and using the local ones and using the local community restaurants and stuff like that too. So I thought that was really smart, and I understood why they were doing it. They were in a highly competitive area, and it was to bring labor costs down and stuff like that. So, but David's absolutely right. And listen, we're in the service industry, and what's going to differentiate us between an online casino? You know what I mean? So, I think that's very important. We are in the service business. We have created these resorts for a reason, and people, when they come in, they want to be treated special, So
does tribal financial advisors, what's your guys' next? Do you have a big conference coming up or any kind of, meeting place you guys are focused on? Other than NIGA's show in Anaheim, I'm just wondering what the conference situation is amongst in your industry, the banking, finance.
I think CNIGA is the next one that we would be potentially attending. We're taking it case by case.
Okay.
Depending, we were excited about attending some of the conferences last year, and then sadly, I think, we know firsthand that some folks were negatively impacted by going to those conferences. So just, playing it by ear. Also talking to our friends at Trilogy, who I think you guys are both familiar with, Valerie and Sheila, about like what conferences to attend, but it's really case by case. I do want to touch base though on one of the benefits of this environment to tribal gaming is, Jason, you brought up conferences. For many years while we were going to conferences, it's like, well, the database is aging, and how do we address that component of it? How is tribal gaming going to look 5 to 10 years from now? And one of the things that's really interesting, about this environment is there's two positives, I think. One is gamers that were averse to going to tribal casinos, and believe it or not, that's something that was cited to us, is even though there was potentially a gamer in your locals market, they just had an aversion to going to tribal gaming facilities and would go to more corporate locations like Las Vegas. Because of this environment, they gave tribal gaming a shot, and that's one positive driver. The other thing too is the younger demographic that really wasn't that interested in going to, and when I say younger, 20s, 30s, even 40s, that wasn't really prone to going to visit gaming facilities. This has provided a catalyst to those younger demographics to going to tribal casinos. And so I only tie this, Jason, to your comment about what conferences, where we see folks leery about going, traveling to Vegas or the East Coast or whatever location a conference is. We see the offset to tribal gaming or the benefit. Hey, we're more apt to go visit a local tribal gaming facility now because folks have been placed in this environment.
I'm seeing that empirically too, and what I'm seeing, and actually, it's always amazing when you do meet someone who says, "Oh, but first time I've been to your casino," and it's like, we've been around for 25 years. What do you mean you finally have come? But I think you're right. I think a lot of people are just saying, well, we don't want to travel. Let's go. And I think that's a big benefit for tribal gaming, the fact that all the locals casinos are supercharged. But again, we do have a lot of obstacles ahead of us. It isn't a clear shot for success. Nothing is guaranteed. We still have to do our best. Jason brings a really good point. Our conference is in March, and we will be focusing on this new normal. We have to learn how to do business in this pandemic. This is not going away. We can't wish it away. So we have to learn how to deal with it. Keeping our employees safe, keeping our customers safe, and keeping ourselves safe. I think that's a really big deal and a priority from everyone that I've spoken with.
But we've really missed, we've gone to the last couple of conferences, but 2020 and early, we miss getting out and seeing people because, there's only so much you can do with Zoom. You can get content. I can't remember which one it was, maybe it was the one in San Antonio where they brought in some of the speakers from the government and stuff. They brought them in online, but there was an in-person, audience there.
That was NFOA.
Yeah, NFOA.
Yeah.
I thought that was, that was helpful because you got good content, right, from people that you didn't necessarily need to see. But just getting out, breaking bread with people, seeing them, having a drink, saying hello. You can't travel to see everybody over the country, but having these points of interest where we all get together. We've got to keep doing that. This is a people business, and again, we've been trained a little bit on Zoom. We've been trained to work remotely, but day in and day out, we got to sit down and look each other in the eye and break some bread, and that's how we get things accomplished.
Well,
Bill
one,
Gates-
yeah, go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
No, I said Bill Gates said in 2 to 3 years we'll be doing that in the metaverse. So we'll just put on our goggles and meet in the metaverse.
Sure.
It's eye to eye. It's I can hang out there all day with you guys.
I'm not doing business with the Furby. I'm not doing it personally with Furby, and I'm not doing it. I refuse. Gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank you very much for coming on. I apologize about the Furby comment. If you don't know what it is, you might want to Google it and be prepared. Make sure your kids are gone. Go to YouTube. It's actually, you get more. You'll get it really. Thanks so much. We really appreciate this. Was a fascinating conversation. Obviously, Indian country is very resilient. If anything knows anyone about pandemics, it's us. We'll get through this thing. And thank you, David Howard from TFA Capital and William Crader. Guys, gentlemen, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here. Jason, is there anything else we want to say? Is that it? You want to wrap it up, my friend?
That's about it. We're going to be reaching out to folks real soon here about a new and improved associate membership program. I know I've been saying that since last fall, but it's taken a lot of work and we've had some hiccups. And we had to get Clarion on board, our new joint partner. So, but we're going to roll out some new stuff for everybody to hope it make it worth your while to sign up and be associate member at National Indian Gaming Association. So thanks.
Yeah, and then we're also working on the agenda for the show, and like I said, will be about, you know, how to do business while you're chained to the mast during a hurricane. You know, so
Yeah.
yeah, it's the Ulysses business plan, I call it. You know, so
Yeah.
brave
Okay.
Ulysses. So, gentlemen, thank you very much.
We'll be there. We'll be there.
All right, yeah, we'll
All right.
see you there. And
Looking
actually,
forward
we'll
to
be
it.
talking. We'll be talking, and everyone, thank you so much for
Thanks, Bill.
sticking
Thanks,
by, and
David.
we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you,
okay?
Jason.
Thanks
Thank
a lot,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.